I had barely pulled into the driveway when the headache began. Not from the long day, not from the hospital lights or the endless paperwork, but from the sight of her.
Barbara Whitmore.
Arms folded, lips curled into that smug saccharine smile of hers, like she had been standing there rehearsing it all morning. My father, slumped in the passenger seat beside me, looked like a shell of himself. The ride home after yet another medical procedure had drained him so much he could barely keep his head up. All I wanted was to get him inside, into bed, where he could breathe without pain for once. But the universe, or more accurately, our HOA president, had other plans. I stepped out of the car, trying to ignore her. Maybe, just maybe, she'd let us pass this time. But Barbara was already striding forward, her heels clicking like a metronome of misery. "That vehicle is a violation of HOA regulations," she declared, waving her laminated rulebook like it was the Constitution. I closed my eyes for a beat, forcing calm. "Barbara, I've told you before, it's not a commercial vehicle. It's just a regular black sedan." Her eyes narrowed.
Look commercial to me.
"The bylaws are clear, no business-related vehicles." I moved to the trunk and started unloading Dad's wheelchair. My back was aching, my nerves shot, but I kept my voice level. "My father just had a medical procedure. Please. Can this wait?" But Barbara thrived on confrontation. She pulled her booklet tighter to her chest, flipping it open dramatically. "Page 23, paragraph 4, she announced like some twisted librarian. "Any vehicle used for business purposes or deliveries is subject to immediate removal.
No exception."
From the corner of my eye, I saw my father struggling to lift himself. He leaned against the doorframe, his lips trembling with exhaustion. "Barbara," I said through clenched teeth, "this isn't a delivery van. This is a car helping a sick man get home." But she didn't care. "I've already called the tow truck," she said with a shrug. "Should be here any minute." I froze. "You what?" She smiled wider.
"You're on the clock, sweetheart." The world tilted a little.
I glanced at my father, whose expression went blank with confusion. "Son, if it's going to be trouble, maybe I can just—" His voice trailed off. He couldn't even finish the sentence, much less move the car. I clenched my fists. "No, Dad. You're not moving an inch."
This is insane.
And right on cue, like a punchline to the cruelest joke, the growl of a diesel engine rolled up the street. The tow truck appeared, hazard lights flashing like sirens. It pulled up slowly, deliberately, and stopped right in front of our driveway. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand, utterly indifferent. "Which one, ma'am?" he asked, already reaching for his pen. "That one," Barbara said with relish, pointing directly at my car.
Hook it up. He stepped forward.
"You're making a mistake," I said, voice trembling. "This car belongs to my wife. You tow it, and you're opening a can of legal trouble." "Is that so?" Barbara sneered. "What is she?"
FBI.
I looked her dead in the eyes. "She's an undercover officer. You really want to play this game?" The driver hesitated. "If it's government property." Barbara cut him off.
No marking, no sirens.
"Just a plain car. Hook it." But the driver wasn't so sure anymore. "If it's official," he muttered, "I'm not touching it. I'm not losing my job over this." Barbara rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd sprain something. "He's lying. Obviously." That's when I stepped closer to her and said, quiet but firm, "Karen, you touch that tow cable and you'll regret it." She flinched. Just a bit. But enough.
And then, salvation.
My wife's car rolled into the driveway. Calm. Silent. Surgical. She stepped out like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Sunglasses. Badge.
Silence. Barbara blinked.
"Excuse me?" my wife asked coolly. Barbara tried to puff up. "He said you're a cop."
What is next, you say yeah.
My wife didn't speak. She pulled out her wallet. Flipped it open.
The badge cooked the sun just right.
Barbara's mouth fell open. The tow truck driver went pale. And somewhere behind us, a neighbor gasped. I folded my arms.
Still think wheeling, Karen.
Barbara Whitmore's face turned the color of sour milk. Her smug grin faded, replaced by something almost foreign on her expression: uncertainty. The badge in my wife's hand didn't just shimmer, it roared. The tow truck driver stiffened, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. My wife didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Barbara stammered, "If that doesn't prove anything. You could have printed that online." The driver held up his hands. "I'm out," he said flatly.
I'm not touching a police vehicle.
Not with a 10-foot pole. Barbara wheeled on him like a rattlesnake.
You can't just walk away.
"Lady," he said deadpan, "I'm not getting sued because you've got a power complex."
The tension in the air cracked like a thunderclap.
From behind me, I heard whispers. Neighbors had begun to gather. People who'd lived in quiet fear of Barbara's reign were now emerging like survivors after a storm. Some with cautious glances.
Hauteur, smiling.
Mrs. Santiago stood near her front porch, arms crossed, expression smug. She'd once been fined by Barbara for having excessively cheerful holiday lights. About time someone shut her down, she muttered to no one in particular. Barbara was cornered and she knew it. Her eyes darted around, searching for support, but there was none to be found. "This is your fault," she snapped, spinning toward me with fire in her eyes. "You lied. You embarrassed me." I held my ground, arms still folded.
He told you the truth.
You just didn't want to hear it. Then came the final nail in the coffin. The tow truck driver scratched the back of his head and muttered, "Someone's paying for my time."
He don't care who.
Barbara's jaw tightened. "I'm not paying for this circus." "You called it in. That's on you." I was enforcing community rules. "Then enjoy explaining that to collections," the driver shrugged, walking back to his cab. Her fury was volcanic. She turned to me again, voice shaking with rage. "You'll regret this. I'm still the president of this HOA. You humiliated me in front of everyone." Before I could respond, my wife took a single step forward, her voice cool and clear. "You called him Karen."
You pay, Karen.
Barbara's jaw dropped.
L'octet rippled quietly through the crowd.
The nickname had been cemented.
D'était when the rage boilait d'over.
She yanked her purse open, snatched out her card, and practically threw it at the tow truck driver. "Take it. Hope you're all real proud of yourselves." The driver didn't flinch. "Always a pleasure." And just like that, Barbara Whitmore, the tyrant of our neighborhood, was left fuming, credit card charged, and reputation fractured. She stormed off, muttering threats, her power slipping like sand through her fingers. My father had watched it all from the car. He looked exhausted but quietly vindicated. As I helped him into his wheelchair, he asked softly, "Are we safe now?" I forced a reassuring smile.
Oui, fin, dad. Karen est sur le barque.
But I was wrong. By the end of that week, the first of many violation letters landed on our doorstep. It read like satire: my lawn was too tall by less than an inch. The next one claimed our mailbox had faded paint. A third demanded we remove the wheelchair ramp my father depended on to enter the house. Each letter was signed with Barbara's flourishing signature. It became a routine. Wake up. Check the mailbox. Discover a new absurdity. Her retaliation was in full swing. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the stack. My father lowered himself into the seat beside me, his hands trembling. "All this," he whispered, "because you stood up to her?" I nodded grimly. "I feel like it's my fault," he said, barely audible. "You moved the car closer to help me. You built the ramp for me." I reached for his hand. "None of this is on you. Karen would have found something. She always does." He gave me a tired nod, but I could see the guilt sinking deeper. His health was already fragile, heart issues, nerve damage, and now, this constant harassment was wearing him down. He rarely left the house, and when he did, he glanced over his shoulder like a criminal on the run. One night, after putting him to bed, I sat in the dark, staring at the stack of violations. That's when I decided I wouldn't just survive Barbara's wrath. I'd expose it.
Not just for my father.
But for every neighbor she'd bullied into silence. Barbara didn't stop.
If anything, she doubled down.
Every day brought a new violation notice, each more ridiculous than the last. First, it was the lawn height, supposedly over-regulation by 0.7 inches. Then the wheelchair ramp, which she claimed was unauthorized construction and aesthetically disruptive. Next, it was the mailbox, which she said didn't meet the color scheme.
All nonsense.
All designed to break me down piece by piece. I kept them all. I wasn't just going to complain, I was going to build a case. My wife helped me catalog everything. We scanned letters, took photos, and referenced legal codes. She highlighted every relevant line in the Americans with Disabilities Act and Fair Housing Guidelines. She's not just being a nuisance, she said one night. She's breaking federal law. Even Dad got involved. Weak as he was, he helped me organize files, his frail fingers moving papers slowly but deliberately. Never thought I'd be part of something like this, he murmured. But I'll be damned if she scares me into hiding. And then something unexpected happened. Our neighbors began speaking up. It started with a knock at the door. A single mom named Jasmine, holding a thick folder and looking visibly shaken, asked if we had a moment. Her voice trembled as she recounted how Barbara had threatened to report her to Child Protective Services over a plastic basketball hoop on her lawn. She said it was a safety hazard, Jasmine said, near tears. Then she said if I didn't take it down, she'd report me for neglect. Then came Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. They'd been fined for having their porch lights too bright. Another neighbor admitted Barbara had demanded a cash payment to overlook an unauthorized flower bed. Each story peeled back another layer of her corruption. And each one strengthened our resolve. I thought it was just me, Jasmine whispered. It's never just one, I told her. We formed a small group chat. Then an email chain. Before long, nearly 24 neighbors were sharing their experiences. Exorbitant fines, threats, and hush-money deals that felt more like extortion than enforcement. Dad watched from his recliner, his eyes gleaming with something I hadn't seen in a long time, hope. We're not alone, he said quietly. That means we've got power.
He started gathering everything. Documents, photos, testimony.
My wife compiled digital folders, labeled with names, dates, and violations. One by one, our community was becoming a united front. But Barbara wasn't done. One afternoon, as I was helping my father to the porch for some fresh air, she appeared again. Right on schedule. Same posture. Same tone. You're still using that ramp? She asked, eyes narrowing. I sent a notice. It violates uniformity rules. I stared here, stunned. That ramp is the only way my father can leave the house. He's a disabled veteran. You know that. She shrugged. We all make sacrifices for the good of the community. If he needs that many accommodations, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood. I saw my father's hands clench the armrests of his wheelchair. His voice was quiet but firm. Ma'am, I gave my legs and 20 years of my life for this country. Are you saying I don't belong here? She didn't flinch. I'm saying rules are rules. The rage inside me burned so hot it left me speechless. But before I could respond, my wife stepped out the front door. That's enough, she said. Her voice cut through the air like a scalpel.
Barbara, you're infringing on ADA protection.
Keep going, and you won't just have angry neighbors, you'll have a lawsuit. Barbara's face twisted. We'll see about that, she snapped. I have every right to enforce community standards. And with that, she turned and stormed off. Dad sat there, shoulders slumped. Maybe I should just stay inside. Stay out of sight. I crouched down beside him, placing a hand on his knee. No, Dad. This is your home. She's the one who needs to back down. But the truth was, she wouldn't. Not unless we made her. And that's when the idea came. If we could collect enough testimonies, if we could document every shady tactic, every threat, every illegal fine, then maybe, just maybe, we could bring Barbara Whitmore's regime crashing down. Not with yelling. Not with threats. But with evidence. Hard truth. And the support of a neighborhood that had finally had enough. The days that followed were a blur of calls, emails, and photocopies. What had started as a quiet rebellion was now a full-blown investigation, led not by lawyers or officials, but by neighbors who were tired of living in fear. We turned my living room into a command center. The coffee table was stacked with HOA letters, witness statements, digital printouts, photos of the ramp, and receipts from residents who had been forced to pay Barbara in cash. My wife kept everything organized, highlighting lines from ADA and fair housing laws that Barbara had violated again and again. "This is enough to get the city involved," she said, flipping through a file. "Maybe even the state." Dad watched from his spot on the couch, a warm blanket over his legs and that quiet smile on his face. "Never thought I'd see the day this neighborhood fought back." Then came the moment that nearly broke us. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The air was warm, the sky clear, and for once we weren't dealing with a new notice, just a bit of peace. I was sitting with Dad, helping him go over his next medical appointment, when I heard it again.
The law, unmistakable growl off a tow truck.
My stomach dropped. I rushed to the window. There it was, pulling into our driveway, again. I ran outside, Dad wheeling himself after me as fast as he could. Sure enough, the driver was already halfway through hooking up the black sedan. The same one.
My wife's car.
And of course, Barbara was standing on the curb, arms crossed, her face beaming with smug satisfaction. "You were warned," she said. "That vehicle still violates the bylaws." I exploded. "You know that's a police vehicle." She feigned ignorance, tilting her head. "Then where's the badge? The logo? The sirens? It looks commercial to me." Before I could argue, I heard a second car pull up behind hers. And this time, we weren't alone. A local police cruiser, called in by a neighbor who'd seen the tow truck, rolled to a stop. A uniformed officer stepped out and walked straight toward Barbara. "Is this the same vehicle from last week?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Barbara hesitated. Yes. But I'm within my rights. I have the authority to tow any vehicle that violates HOA policy." The officer raised a hand, silencing her. "Ma'am, you've been warned. State law overrides HOA policy. You don't get to decide what is or isn't an official vehicle." The tow truck driver looked like he wanted to disappear. "I didn't know it was her again," he muttered.
"I'm not touching it."
Barbara's mouth opened and closed. She turned to me, then to the crowd that had once again gathered, neighbors filming, whispering, watching her unravel in real time. "This is harassment," she screeched. "I'm being harassed." The officer didn't budge. "Ma'am, if you continue this, we will pursue legal action. This isn't a misunderstanding anymore. This is targeted harassment." Barbara stared at him like she couldn't understand the words. For a woman used to being the loudest voice in every room, being silenced by someone in uniform struck a nerve. She stormed off without another word, vanishing into her house like a ghost slipping behind a curtain. But the damage was done. What she didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that her repeated calls to the tow company had triggered something far bigger. 2 days later, we started getting visits. Plain cars. Suits and clipboards. Quiet conversations on front porches. The city housing authority had arrived. Someone somewhere had reported her. We didn't know if it was the police, the tow company, or one of the neighbors. But it didn't matter. The investigation had begun. And Barbara? She had no idea the noose was tightening. Dad was the first to notice the change. "You feel that?" he asked me as we sat outside that evening. "The air's different." He was right. The fear was shifting. The power was shifting. People were standing taller, speaking louder. They were no longer looking over their shoulders when they talked about her. I looked over at my father, thin, worn down, but upright and alert. And I knew with absolute certainty that Barbara Whitmore's days were numbered.
We weren't juste surviving anymore. We were coming for her.
It was a bright Friday afternoon when everything finally came crashing down. Dad and I were sitting on the porch, sipping tea, enjoying what had become a rare and precious moment of calm. For the first time in weeks, we weren't bracing for another violation notice or the sound of tow trucks rumbling up the street. The sun warmed our faces, the birds were singing, and for just a second, it felt like life might actually be returning to normal. Then 2 unmarked sedans pulled up in front of Barbara Whitmore's house. They didn't linger. The doors opened in sync, and out stepped a group of city officials, followed closely by 2 uniformed officers. Their movements were practiced, purposeful.
No hésitation.
No smiles.
Dad straightened in his seat, eyes narrowing. "Is that?" I didn't answer. I was already on my feet. Neighbors began to emerge, one by one, drawn by the quiet intensity in the air. There were no sirens, no loud confrontations. Just the sound of boots on pavement and the low murmur of authority. Barbara opened the door in a floral blouse, hair perfectly set, like she had been hosting an afternoon tea. But the illusion shattered as one of the officials stepped forward and handed her a thick envelope, official documents. She laughed at first, a high-pitched nervous sound. "This must be a mistake," she said. "I'm the HOA president. You don't just show up like this." One of the officers calmly stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're here under the authority of the city's housing department and the state attorney general's office. We have questions about HOA financial records, reports of harassment, and ADA violations." Barbara tried to slam the door. The officer wedged his boot between it and the frame. She froze. What followed felt surreal. They entered her house, some with clipboards, others with boxes and cameras. We couldn't hear everything, but we didn't have to. Barbara's face said it all. She shouted something about unlawful entry and overreach, but no one listened. She was no longer in control. My wife joined us on the porch, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the chaos across the street. "Is that an arrest warrant they're showing her?" "Looks like it," I replied. Barbara stumbled back, nearly falling as one of the officials stepped inside. Another spoke into a radio, signaling a second team. They began seizing boxes, files, HOA records, electronic devices. It was everything we'd been working toward. All the documentation. All the testimonies. All the pressure that had finally forced someone in authority to take notice. Neighbors were filming openly now. Some whispered. Others didn't bother hiding their glee. Mrs. Santiago clapped once, slowly, like the finale of a long-awaited play. Took them long enough. Barbara's voice grew shriller, more desperate. "You're making a huge mistake. I run this neighborhood." But no one was listening to her anymore. The moment the door closed behind the officers, a cheer went up from across the block. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. But it was real. It was the sound of a community exhaling for the first time in years. Days later, the headlines confirmed it all: embezzlement investigations, ADA violations, falsified tow reports, and dozens of complaints of harassment. Barbara Whitmore was forced to resign as HOA president. And though she tried to downplay the situation, the damage was done. Her hold on the neighborhood had shattered. We received a formal apology letter from the interim board. The ramp stayed. So did the car. So did we. Dad, though still frail, began joining us outside more often.
No more Ida.
No more guilt. He smiled more, laughed more, even started gardening again from the porch planter boxes. "I can breathe again," he said one morning, holding a mug of coffee in trembling hands. "Not just my lungs. Everything." The neighborhood changed too. Slowly, but noticeably. People waved more. Talked more. Kids started playing in the streets again. Jasmine's basketball hoop was back. Mr. Reynolds put his porch lights up to full brightness during the next holiday season. Even the mailboxes got a fresh coat of mismatched colors, and no one cared. We were no longer scared. We were finally free. Looking back, I never imagined we'd be the ones to spark the fire that burned Barbara's empire down. I just wanted my father to be able to get out of the car without a confrontation. But when the injustice stacked up, when the rules were used to crush, not protect, someone had to push back. We did. Not just for us, but for every neighbor who'd ever felt too small to speak. And I learned something I'll never forget. Power built on fear is never real power. Truth is louder. And when you finally find the courage to stand, others will stand with you.